fabled heat, where magic meets desire. Subscribe to ignite the fantasy.
The masquerade ball reeked of jasmine and ozone, a warning that hung in the air like a challenge. I could taste the metallic tang of the storm that always seemed to follow Adrian Voss, even beneath crystal chandeliers and swaying silk banners. My raven feather mask scraped the skin of my cheekbones, but I dared not adjust it, not with his eyes on me. Adrian moved through the crowd like a blade through silk, his silver-threaded coat crackling with contained energy, each step leaving a faint scent of ozone that made my pulse quicken. The violins rose and fell, matching the thrum of my heart, yet all I felt was a dangerous heat building between us, a tightrope stretched over a chasm of desire. When his hand closed over mine on the champagne flute, the glass frosted instantly, delicate ice spreading like a whispered secret. "Clever little liar," he murmured, his breath warm against my skin, his thumb pressing into the pulse point at my wrist, sending a wave of anticipation through my veins. "Did you think I wouldn't recognize my own design?" His obsidian mask hid his eyes, but his smile cut sharper than any clockwork gear, cold, calculated, and hungry. My workshop's logic could not save me now, not from this storm wearing a man's skin, a storm that drew me in with every breath. I felt like a moth, helpless and drawn to the flame, my heart pounding like a war drum. What was it about him that pulled me deeper, that made me feel I was drowning in the depths of his presence even when his eyes were hidden? I thought back to the first time I saw him, the way he moved with predatory grace, the way his scent of iron and bergamot clung to him like a promise. My hands, calloused from years of shaping gears, trembled as his fingers traced the line of my jaw, the heat of his touch igniting a fire I had never allowed myself to feel. He leaned close, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. "Yield, or I will break you," he whispered, the words a promise and a threat. The music swelled, the room spinning around us, but all I could hear was the steady thrum of his heart against my own. In that moment I understood, surrendering to him would be the most exquisite destruction I had ever known. I let my breath hitch, my voice low and raw. "Then break me," I said, the words tasting like steel on my tongue, my desire as sharp as the gears that once defined my life. Adrian's smile widened, his hand sliding to the small of my back, pulling me closer until our bodies pressed together, heat radiating between us. The night stretched ahead, a tapestry of shadows and light, and I knew the game had only just begun. The ballroom swirled around us like a living organism, each guest a pulse in a massive, beating heart. Lanterns floated above, their glass orbs flickering with a soft amber glow that caught the dust motes and turned them into tiny stars. I could hear the soft rustle of silk as dancers twirled, the clink of crystal goblets, and the low murmur of conspiratorial whispers. Yet beneath all that, a low hum of static seemed to vibrate from Adrian's coat, as if the very fabric were charged with a storm waiting to break. I tried to steady my breathing, counting the beats of my own heart against the rhythm of the violins. "You always come in like a tempest," I said, letting the words slip out as if they were a confession rather than a challenge. He chuckled, a sound that resonated in my chest like a struck bell. "And you always try to harness the wind," he replied, his voice low enough that only I could hear it. "You think your inventions can cage a force like me." A flash of memory surged forward, late nights in my workshop, the smell of oil and hot metal, the steady click of gears meshing. I had built clocks that could predict the tide, automata that could mimic a sparrow's song. All of that precision felt suddenly inadequate in the face of Adrian's raw, untamed energy. "Perhaps," I admitted, "but even a storm can be measured if you know the right equations." He tilted his head, the mask's dark curve catching the light. "Equations," he mused, "are for those who fear the unknown. I prefer to feel it." His fingers tightened around my wrist, the pressure a reminder that I was no longer the master of my own creations. The chill from the ice on the flute seeped into my skin, spreading like a secret that refused to stay hidden. I could feel the faint vibration of his pulse against my own, a rhythm that seemed to sync with the music, pulling me deeper into the dance. The orchestra shifted to a slower, more languid melody. A lone harpist plucked a single note that lingered in the air, resonating with the metallic taste on my tongue. I closed my eyes for a heartbeat, letting the sound wash over me, and when I opened them again, Adrian was still there, his presence a gravity that refused to let me drift away. "Tell me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "what do you truly desire? Not the gears, not the accolades. What does the man behind the mask crave?" I hesitated, the question striking a chord I had long tried to silence. Desire for me had always been a blueprint, something I could draft, test, and refine. Yet here, in the glow of chandeliers and the electric scent of his coat, that logic unraveled. I began, feeling the words catch in my throat. I crave something that cannot be measured. I crave freedom from the constraints of my own making. He smiled, a thin line that seemed to cut through the darkness. Freedom, he repeated, as if tasting the word. It is a dangerous thing, especially for someone who has spent a lifetime building cages. And you, I asked, daring to turn the question back on him. His eyes, though hidden, felt like twin storms, swirling with intent. I am the storm, he said simply. I am the chaos that shatters the cages you build, and I am also the calm that follows, the silence after the thunder. The music swelled again, a crescendo that seemed to echo the clash of our wills. I felt the heat of his body against mine, the subtle shift of his weight as he guided me toward the balcony that overlooked the garden below. The night air was cooler there, the scent of rain-soaked earth mingling with the lingering jasmine. We stepped onto the marble steps, the stone cool beneath our boots. Below, the garden was a maze of hedges trimmed into fantastical shapes, dragons, phoenixes, and other mythic beasts that seemed to watch us with stone eyes. The moon hung low, a silver disk that painted everything in a soft, ethereal light. Adrian turned to face me, his mask catching the moonlight, making the obsidian surface glimmer like a still pond. "Do you trust me?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost vulnerable. I swallowed, feeling the weight of his question settle like a stone in my chest. Trust was a concept I had engineered, a series of checks and balances. Yet here, under the open sky, the idea felt both terrifying and exhilarating. "I trust you enough to step into the storm," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. He reached up, his gloved hand brushing the edge of his mask, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a fluid motion, he lifted the mask, revealing eyes that burned with a fierce, electric blue. The sight took my breath away. They were the color of a summer sky after a thunderstorm, bright and endless. In those eyes, I saw a reflection of my own longing, a yearning for something beyond the gears and cogs, beyond the predictable tick of a clock. I saw a promise of chaos, of destruction, and of rebirth. "Come," he said, extending his hand. "Let us leave this masquerade behind and find a place where we can be more than masks and machines." I placed my hand in his, feeling the faint hum of static travel up his arm and into my own skin. The contact sparked a jolt that made my heart race, a sensation that was both terrifying and intoxicating. We slipped away from the ballroom, moving through corridors lined with tapestries that depicted ancient battles between dragons and knights. The corridors seemed endless, each turn echoing with distant laughter and music that faded behind us. The further we went, the more the air changed, less perfume, more the raw scent of rain on stone. Finally, we emerged into a hidden courtyard, a secret garden that the palace kept from the public eye. Ivy curled around marble statues, and a small fountain burbled softly, its water catching the moonlight and scattering it like diamonds. Adrian pulled me close, his breath hot against my ear. "Here no one sees us," he whispered. "No one knows the names we wear. Only the night knows us, and the night is a good witness." I pressed my forehead against his, feeling the steady thrum of his heart, a rhythm that seemed to sync with the gentle ripple of the fountain. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the water. He smiled, a genuine curve that softened the sharpness of his earlier demeanor. "We create," he said. "Not clocks or gears, but moments. We will write a story that no one can predict, a dance of storm and calm." In that instant, I understood that the battle between my logic and his chaos was not a war to be won, but a partnership to be forged. The gears in my mind began to turn, not to build a machine, but to map a new kind of architecture, one built on trust, desire, and the willingness to surrender to the unknown. We stood there hand in hand, the night wrapping around us like a velvet cloak. The storm that always seemed to follow Adrian was no longer a threat. It was a promise of change, of transformation. And I, the man who had spent his life measuring time, felt the seconds stretch and bend, becoming something softer, something more alive. "Will you stay with me?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, "when the storm passes?" I looked into his electric eyes, feeling the weight of centuries of expectation lift from my shoulders. "I will," I answered, the certainty in my voice surprising even me, "because I have finally learned that some things cannot be contained and some storms are worth riding." He pressed a kiss to my temple, the contact brief but charged, like a spark that could ignite 1,000 fires. The kiss lingered, leaving a taste of ozone and bergamot on my lips, a reminder that the world we left behind was still there, but we had stepped into something new. The night deepened and the garden seemed to breathe with us. Shadows danced among the statues, and the fountain's song grew louder, as if urging us forward. We walked together toward the far end of the courtyard, where a hidden gate led to a path lined with lanterns that flickered like fireflies. As we stepped onto the path, Adrian took my hand once more, his grip firm yet gentle. "The masquerade may end, but the dance continues," he said, his voice echoing softly against the stone walls. I nodded, feeling a surge of excitement that rivaled the first time I had ever held a tool in my workshop. The future was uncertain, the storm still whispered in the air, but for the first time in my life, I welcomed the chaos. Together we vanished into the night, the sound of our footsteps merging with the distant music of the ballroom, a reminder that even in a world of masks and machines, the heart beats to its own rhythm, and sometimes that rhythm is a storm waiting to be embraced.